The Omnic Crisis was the most devastating event in the Overwatch universe. Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. My name is al-g-man, and today I want to talk to you about the most important thing in Overwatch, that being the Omnic Crisis. We're going to start from the very beginning, going over the background of the war until its very end at the hands of Overwatch. So buckle up, because this is going to be a long video. So without further ado, let's dive in to this historical moment, the Omnic Crisis. It all begins with a corporation called Omnica. The Omnica Corporation built omniums so that robot populations could be created to bolster manufacturing and create economic equality worldwide. These robots, or omnics, were spread all around the world.
Everyday needs that puts power at your fingertips.
Line of robots that put power by your side.
And geared up to put power in their hands. Omnica Corp, always looking to what's next.
The next step for Omnica was to create the God programs. These would be the next generation of artificial intelligence, and they were interwoven into human infrastructure, woven so far into it that food distribution systems were so efficient that famine and poverty was eradicated. There are a few God programs worth mentioning, such as Chernobyl, which was a God program responsible for global security, Macaria, which was a God program responsible for communication equity, Xibalba, which I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, was a God program with the primary focus of energy equity, and finally we have Anubis, which was designed for conservation purposes. It wouldn't be long after that a team of Omnica scientists, led by Dr. Mina Liao, created the most advanced AI in history, Aurora. Aurora was fully sentient. We're not going to dive too much into Aurora here, since we have a video on Aurora on the channel. If you want to learn more about Aurora, you can go check out that video after this one. But Aurora is born, and while Aurora was on her path to legal personhood, this would have a knock-on effect to Omnica Corporation. You see, due to Aurora being different than the rest of the Omnics, she was sentient, but her model could not be mass-produced, and her creation led to Omnica being subjected to a level of scrutiny it wasn't able to withstand, and eventually Omnica would shut down after. There'd be a few other things to be involved with this, along with evidence of fraud, so the production lines fell silent and omniums were left unmonitored and abandoned. Now, since all these omniums were just sort of abandoned and not destroyed, would lead to the first seeds of the Omnic War being sown. You see, one of the God programs that helped bring about this world, this utopia that made life easier for humanity, would in fact be the one to start the war. Anubis. Previously mentioned to be the God program designed for conservation. On its own, it would deduce, for the betterment of the world and conservation, humanity must be eradicated. Now, there is evidence that Anubis planned its assault for months before the war actually began. An OR-7000 unit that would later be known as Ramattra came online on March 29th of the war's beginning. The actual war itself would begin in the third quarter of the year, with Anubis launching its assault in 2 waves. The first city to be affected by the God program was Lagos, where Omnics started attacking their owners. Social media reports would speak of invasion underway, while in Central Africa there were unconfirmed reports of firefights between humans and automated machines. The second wave would occur as the phenomena repeated itself in multiple cities all across the world. To note some, it would happen in London, Mexico City, Toronto, and Hong Kong. Now remember, Omnics are all over the world, so when this happened, humanity was completely caught off guard. All across the world there would be reports of Omnics attacking, and the casualty estimates placed the number of dead in the millions. The war had officially begun between Omnics and humanity, and this uprising was global. Cities all around the world were now under attack, and the conflict also had an effect on sparking civil unrest. In response, nations of the world would send their armed forces to battle the Omnics, and utilize their own technologies to combat the threat. Now, this was a war many countries thought they were prepared to fight, and for the most part, each country would fight independently. And This confidence wasn't without reason, as for the first 2 weeks of the war, Canada appeared to be winning. Humanity had greater firepower and air superiority, and not to mention that the Omnic servants integrated into their lives had not been designed for combat. Toronto was retaken from the Omnics, and a common refrain from the CAF was that they'd be home by Christmas. How foolish they would be. This was only the start. Who knows if this was tactical? If Anubis wanted to make these less combative Omnics start a war so humanity could get their hopes up that it would be fine in a matter of weeks. But this would change everything. Anubis would reactivate the previously abandoned Omniums, and within the first 24 hours of the war, some Omnic combat units were seen in action. These Omniums were capable of putting out legions of militarized robots, primarily consisting of E-54 Bastions, ATW Huntsmans, and the OR-14. Omnics would also hijack pre-existing technology such as the Titan Walker, and convert it into a weapon of war. The situation was growing ever more dire. No matter how many bots Anubis was losing, they were swiftly replaced, and the total number of Omnics numbered in the millions. Not one single nation on the planet, no matter how powerful its military was, could permanently shut down a single Omnium. One of the things that made it extremely difficult was that the robots were adapting. They were learning every single thing they knew about humanity's defenses, their tactics, everything. And these robots that were once celebrated by humanity had become a tactical nightmare. And the worst thing of all, there were no demands from the Omnic side. There was no reason for this aggression. Humanity could not strike a deal to end the war. They simply attacked, and not one person could understand why. Not a single country was able to secure its own territory, and the Omnics were able to take over the world. Some countries were able to hold out against invasion by creating unique task forces, such as the Soldier Enhancement Program in the United States or the Crusaders of Germany. But even these had their flaws. Most of the enhanced soldiers died in the augmentation process, and while the Crusaders had helped Germany tremendously through the war and secure victory at the Battle of Eichenwald, most of the Crusaders didn't walk out of that battle alive. Whether it was on the front lines or not, few heroes were found in the early days of the war. But human counterattacks could only generate a few weeks worth of momentum before the Omnics were able to counter them in turn. Particularly near the Omniums, Omnic counterattacks were vicious and gruesome, as they could resupply faster and introduce more variables to the battlefield. Omnics also had the advantage in night fighting, as infrared vision could only do so much to level the playing field. The war would continue on, and humanity would struggle to survive. The situation was dire, but in the shadow of this war, there was a small glimmer of hope.
Conflict. As the world teetered on the brink of anarchy, a new hope arose. An elite international task force charged with ending the war and restoring liberty to all nations. OVERWATCH. Soldiers, scientists, adventurers, oddities. Guardians who secured global peace for a generation. Under its steadfast protection, the world recovered. And today, though its watch has ended, its soaring ideals of freedom and equality will never be forgotten.
The United Nations would covertly bring together a few unique minds to form a small and nimble team, aimed at striking significant blows against Omnic strongholds. This international task force would be named Overwatch. Soon after the strike team's formation, Overwatch began gaining victories quickly, and the strike team took on near mythic properties. Eventually, rumors of Overwatch would spread through the world's militaries as a sign of hope for humanity winning the war. We now move on to the North American campaign, which would be a key turning point in the war. The Canadian Armed Forces, in conjunction with newly formed Overwatch strike members, would launch a counter-attack against Omnic forces to clear all southern cities in Canada down to Toronto, after which they would use infantry to establish a permanent perimeter against the Detroit Omnium's forces. This Omnium in Detroit had been pumping out a steady stream of Omnics and sending them north over the border into Canada. As a first attempt, Ottawa was subjected to bombing by the RCAF before infantry were sent in. However, the Overwatch Canadian forces were forced to retreat as the Omnic counterattack became too much to withstand. As winter would set in, the CAF supplies would begin to run thin. Regardless of this, however, a second attempt would be made, and Overwatch and the CAF forces were deployed in Toronto. This time, however, their plan would succeed. The Siege would be deployed, which was a joint turret drone system. However, this battle would take a massive toll on the human forces, with a third of them being gone in casualties. By this point, it was still unknown to humanity that Anubis had any role in the crisis. It was also still a mystery how the Omniums were reactivated and why they were pumping out so many warbots. However, slowly but surely, those who were able to look through the data of the Omnics would be able to find Anubis's fingerprints everywhere. Dr. Mina Liao would point out Omnic tactics were adjusting on a global scale, which was surprising, as not only would each Omnium's force face different challenges, but as millions of Omnics were active, they would need some sort of hierarchy to sort through the communication. A CAF soldier by the name of Vivian Chase would suggest that maybe some kind of outside force was taking all the transmitted data and issuing orders to Omnic forces. This would lead to the Omniums being examined, with people shifting through all the network traffic, and Liao concluded that Chase's theory might have some weight. Chase then suggested that if the Omniums were receiving orders from an outside force, and if they were able to sever the Omniums from said force, could they be shut down? It was precisely this line of thinking that led to an attack on the Detroit Omnium as a joint operation between the CAF, Overwatch, and the United States Army. This is just one of many places that Overwatch was deployed, and as such, Overwatch started gaining victories, which galvanized support for the organization. And then soon, the strike team was given an army of its own to support it. It would be 8 months after the start of the war that the tides of battle were beginning to turn in humanity's favor. At least it was in Canada and the United States. This, however, was false hope. Inside human-controlled areas, life went on as best as it could, but in the wider theater, Anubis was far from being defeated. Any tactic, any strategy, any new weapon humanity was deploying, Anubis was finding a way to counter it. For example, Russia would deploy Svyatogor mechs, which in turn were countered by Anubis's titans, which led to many of these human power mechs being utterly destroyed. There was only two outcomes: annihilation or victory. It was by chance, however, that a glimmer of salvation would be found. Every Omnic on Earth was under the control of Anubis, bar one.
My friends, when I was born,
I was overwhelmed. Overwhelmed by the sudden rush of senses, emotions, choices. I was excited. Alive. It was frightening. But I found in facing fear, there is freedom. And through freedom, you can find your own path. I have chosen to share the discovery with you. A new beginning. I wish I could stay. You have this one life. Choose well.
You have this one life.
Choose well.
Choose well.
This was Aurora. Due to Aurora being fully sentient, she was immune to the Anubis directives. So, it was theorized that if Anubis could connect to all Omnics, maybe Aurora could do the same. Using a transmitter, they could replicate Aurora's consciousness and transmit it into every Omnic on the planet. However, this would come at the cost of Aurora's life. But in this moment, Aurora would become the mother of all Omnics. And as she connected with every Omnic on the planet, she would say these words.
Alive. It was frightening. But I found in facing fear, there is freedom. And through freedom, you can find your own path. I have chosen to share the discovery with you. A new beginning. I wish I could stay. You have this one life. Choose well.
Aurora's sacrifice would take effect immediately. Having given free will to Omnics, some Omnics chose to lay down their weapons, some continued to fight for Anubis by their own free will, and others were enraged that they had been enslaved by an AI, and actually took up arms to fight Anubis alongside humanity. It was this moment that would be known as the Awakening, and it was the key point in turning the tide of battle. Taking advantage of the moment, Overwatch would launch a counter-offensive against Anubis. The war would continue for some time, but for the remainder, humanity had the advantage. Counter-strikes and attacks led to the collapse of Anubis loyalists, and in highly secretive and dangerous raids, Overwatch targeted Anubis' command and control protocols, utterly destroying them completely. In what would be the last major operation of the Omnic War, Overwatch infiltrated Anubis' facility in Cairo, rendering the God program inert and by extension all of its forces. Months later, the war was over. With all the surviving Omnics, humanity would strike peace, and many peace accords would be signed. Bastion units that had served Anubis during the war were rounded up and destroyed, besides one. And the Ravager units, which are the same make as Ramattra, were hunted to near extinction. The crisis would change the global landscape, and a financial crisis was experienced in the war's aftermath. By the war's end, over 1 billion humans had been killed, and 30 million children had been left orphaned. Even over 2 decades later, a significant number of people who survived the conflict struggled with PTSD, and a great number of books were written on the war's history. Numerous groups, including mercenary organizations, were left poised to profit from the war's aftermath. In the United States alone, millions were left displaced and were forced to find new places to live, or at least steady work. Celebrated as the saviors, Overwatch enjoyed a meteoric rise in power, prominence, funding, and their research led to an era of countless technological and medical advancements. It continued to operate after the war before being disbanded due to a series of scandals. After the war, there was one question, the Omnic question. Humanity had these robots to help make their life better, and now the machines who once fought against them now are sentient just like them. As noted by Dr. Liao, humanity as a whole adapted remarkably quickly to the presence of sentient robots in their midst. But of course, along with this, brings about a whole new form of prejudice. Australia is one such example. As Omnics were given land within the outback, it would lead to the creation of the Australian Liberation Front, which sparked civil unrest that led to the Omnium's destruction and consequently irradiation of the country's centre. To the ALF and their descendants, the Omnic Crisis had never ended. Sometime after this event, the United Nations would grant all Omnics legal personhood. However, legal issues within countries continued to persist. Decades after the war, the UN's limitations on AI research remained, just in case another sentient one were to emerge. To Liao's dismay, tension between humans and Omnics worsened as time went on. The more human Omnics became, the more hatred they received. Even after 25 years, tensions between Omnics and humans remained high due to the crisis, and tensions reached an even higher peak after the assassination of Takata Mondata. Tensions were so high in King's Row, and Russia had found itself in the midst of a second crisis. Discrimination resulted in the creation of Null Sector, an Omnic extremist group that would plunge the world into war nearly 30 years after the first Omnic crisis had begun. But in other places, such as Numbani, human and Omnic tensions didn't seem to exist. It was here that the two peoples could live together in peace. There's so much to dive into with the Omnic Crisis. This battle that killed 1 billion people, easily the most devastating war in the history of Overwatch. And if it wasn't for Overwatch, all of humanity would be extinct. And then the lasting effects of the war, people still suffering with PTSD, not knowing whether to trust Omnics, even now that they are sentient. There are so many deep themes to this. PTSD, racism, and denial. So many people across the world refusing to believe that Omnics are now just like them, living, feeling beings, and only seeing them as the war machines they once were. Things like this is what I wish were explored more in Overwatch. But I know the massive details of the Omnic Crisis are kept vague in order to allow the fanbase to develop their own theories. I'd love to see a full animated series going over this point in Overwatch's universe. Because let's be real, it is still one of the most interesting things about Overwatch. But hey, that does it for the Omnic Crisis. If you did enjoy this video, do subscribe to the channel for all the Overwatch lore you could ever need. This is sort of our first Overwatch lore video going over a point in time, and less so a character in general. We are going to lead into another point in time with the next lore video being on the Venice Incident. Overwatch was an organization of soldiers, scientists, and heroes. They were acknowledged globally as heroes of peace who put an end to the Omnic Crisis. The organization was on top of the world. But on one fateful night, the golden age of Overwatch would be ended by one single bullet.
All right, Gabriel. Start from the beginning. We arrived in the Venice safe house and set up surveillance on the manor.
We executed our plan under cover of darkness.
You sure you want to hear about this, Jack?
You haven't left me much choice.
Whatever happened to plausible deniability?
A little late for that. Tell me what actually happened.
Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. My name is al-g-man, and today I want to take you on another little adventure into the past of Overwatch with another key event. A key point in Overwatch's history that led to its inevitable downfall. Today, we are going to take a look at the Venice Incident. We start off with a little bit of background. 10 years ago to the present day in Overwatch, we go to a Blackwatch facility in Rome. Members Cole Cassidy, Gabriel Reyes, and Gerard Lacroix are looking into a businessman by the name of Antonio Bartolotti. Intel gives them information that the businessman is affiliated with Talon. Gabriel, Cassidy, and Gerard are looking to take him down. While in the facility, they are talking about their plan to take him down. Something is going on in the shadows. An undercover Talon agent is setting a bomb. Leading up to this, there was already a series of Talon attacks on Overwatch facilities, most notably in Oslo. This is the reason Blackwatch are looking into Antonio, as they believe it was him who coordinated these attacks. While they'll discuss what they're going to do, Cassidy stating that if Talon can hit them from the shadows, so can Blackwatch. But Gerard is for bringing him out of the shadows and into the light so that it can be done by the book. Reyes shakes Gerard's hand and says it's always a pleasure working with him. Himself and Cassidy would leave the facility. And as they are outside, on the steps, the bomb would detonate. Immediately, Cassidy and Reyes would rush into the building to help find any survivors. Lying amongst the rubble and the flames, they would find Gerard Lacroix, unconscious but alive. He would be brought to Overwatch headquarters in Switzerland, where Angela Ziegler would look after him. In a conversation with Jack Morrison, while the two were placing flags on coffins, they would talk about Antonio. Reyes would plead for Blackwatch to go in and secure Antonio, while Jack Morrison would state that they need to stay by the book and do it properly. In the end, while Jack would tell him he can't officially sanction something like this, he left a final call to Reyes, but before would say, "Ask yourself, in the long run, will this help Overwatch keep the world safe?" Reyes would tell him no one will even know Blackwatch was there. So himself, Cole Cassidy, Moira O'Dearn, and Genji Shimada would head to Venice to apprehend Antonio Bartolotti. The Blackwatch team would arrive in Venice at a safe house and set up surveillance on the manor in which Antonio was residing. They quickly found out that Talon were patrolling everywhere. Originally, they would plan to infiltrate the manor by posing as a band employed at the manor, but this idea would not be followed upon. So, when night fell, they would stealthily infiltrate the manor, making their way to Antonio's office. On their way there, they would kill or incapacitate numerous Talon guards. This whole mission depended on their stealth. It was meant to be easy. In, grab Antonio, and get out. Upon reaching Antonio's office, they found him there. However, he was not surprised to see them, nor was he intimidated. In fact, Antonio was pretty smug.
Businessman? Even if you take me now, my friends would have me released within the week. All this theatrics have been a waste of our time.
And he was pointing out that Overwatch abducting a respected businessman would be a public relations nightmare. And he would point out that even if they did take him, his friends within the government would have him released within a week. These words struck at Reyes personally. He reflected on it for only a moment, saying, "You're right, it would happen that way. He'd be out in a week and Overwatch would just come under scrutiny." So, with those words,
you're right.
he would shoot Antonio. The force of this blast would send Antonio straight through his office window. It was this bullet, this shot, this murder that triggered everything to go wrong. In the short term, a bunch of alarms would ring off, essentially stirring the hornet's nest and alerting Talon to Blackwatch's presence, leaving them with plan B to fight their way out. But in the long run, this would have devastating impact on Overwatch's reputation all across the globe. Fighting their way through the streets of Venice, taking out numerous Talon guards, the Blackwatch team would successfully exfiltrate the site and return to base. But this was only the beginning. When they returned to base, Cassidy and Reyes were debriefed by Morrison, Anna Amari, and Gerard Lacroix. Morrison was incensed by what had occurred and demanded that Reyes tell him what actually happened. Plausible deniability be damned. Reyes would snidely respond to Morrison's demands, but nevertheless would recount the entire Rialto mission. In his debrief, he would point out that things didn't always go to plan, and stood by the decisions he made during the mission. As a result, Blackwatch were put on suspension. This was the beginning of the end. Antonio's warning about the public relations issue almost seemed like a prophecy. Because of this mission, because of how it ended, Blackwatch was now known to the public. Up until this point, nobody knew Blackwatch even existed, and now Blackwatch was everywhere, and everything Blackwatch had done was starting to become public. There were stories of assassinations, coercion, kidnappings, torture, or even things more worse. Governments all around the world were calling on the UN to shut down the aggressive and repeated violations of many countries' sovereignty. The UN would launch a special and lengthy, highly secretive investigation into these claims, and as this investigation proceeded, public distrust swelled. The investigations would reveal the existence of Odirin's illicit research within Overwatch, causing Overwatch to disavow any knowledge of her. Due to all this, Blackwatch would be placed on suspension 1 year later. And the worst part about this all, Antonio's death had no effect on Talon whatsoever. New faces stepped up to fill the void left by Antonio's death, including Maximilian and Akande Ogundimu, better known as Doomfist. Cassidy would reflect on this moment.
We were out there. New faces stepped up to fill the void in Talon. And I can't help but wonder if that's where it all started to go wrong.
And he'd be right. Overwatch would begin to enter its twilight years, and due to Reyes' actions, the golden age of Overwatch was put down. This truly is one of the most pivotal moments in Overwatch's history. During the Omnic Crisis, Overwatch were hailed as heroes, saviors, the group of people who ended the war. But now, they were catching fire from every corner of the globe, all due to one man dying. That does it for the Venice Incident. Truly one of the most interesting things in the Overwatch history. A key point that deals not only with Overwatch, but Blackwatch, which is a highly interesting faction that myself and many more people want to see explored. Hopefully going forward in the future we get a bit more lore on Blackwatch, a bit more look into Blackwatch, and who knows, maybe sometime down the line we get another little PvE event dealing with a Blackwatch team.
I was created to lead Omnics into war.
Ramattra, one of the most prominent figures of Overwatch 2, being one of the main antagonists for the story. His past is shrouded in pain, hardship, and a contorted view of humanity. It all dwells from him being an OR-7000 Ravager unit during the Omnic Crisis, being made to lead Omnics into battle and fight against humanity after the rogue Anubis AI took control. And now, in present day, he fights against humanity once again for a better future for him and his kind. After the crisis had ended and the war was over, OR-7000 units were being rounded up and killed, leaving Ramattra as one of the only units left. Feeling lost, angry, confused, he sought to enlighten himself. After hearing rumours of Aurora and her pilgrimage to the Shambhali monastery, he decided to venture forth to Nepal in search of enlightenment. It was here that he decided to train as a monk on the Takata Mandata and study the ways of the Iris and the importance of Omnic kind coexisting with humanity. While here, he would cross paths with another Omnic, known as Zenyatta. The two would go on to be as close as brothers, even staying up at night, counting stars, and wondering how many other Omnics were doing the same. As time went on, Ramattra failed to see the monastery's quest to enlightenment and peace with humanity gaining any progress. And after an incident with humans that almost resulted in the death of his dear brother Zenyatta, he decided he would leave the monastery to take action in a more practical sense. He tried to convince Zenyatta to join him, but he denied, and the two went their own ways.
Brother Zenyatta, have you reconsidered joining me?
I still have much to learn here.
I had hoped we could continue our journey together. We will meet again, Zenyatta.
Now, Ramattra was on his own path, and had his new ideals and beliefs. One such being that humanity does not want to share their world, that the coexistence the monastery was pushing for was no longer feasible. Ramattra went on to form Null Sector with a group of other Omnics, Nameless, Lana, and Zera. Having found an abandoned Omnium, the one in which Ramattra was made, he gained its access codes and restarted its assembly lines. After 2 years of building an army of expendable robots, it was time to put his vision to the test with the London Uprising. Unfortunately for Ramattra, his efforts were overcome, and Null Sector was defeated by an Overwatch strike team consisting of Tracer, Torbjorn, Reinhardt, and Mercy. A factor he did not consider due to Overwatch being banned from interfering in the United Kingdom. Lanet was killed in the crossfire during the uprising, and Nameless and Zera abandoned their cause, fearing Ramattra and his ideals were growing too radical. Also, with the Shambali Monastery condemning Null Sector and their attack on London, this only fueled Ramattra's rage, as he labelled the monastery as traitors to Omnic kind. He was now left alone to lead Null Sector and bring his kind to the ultimate freedom. Until an offer would be extended to him. Doomfist, now rising to power in Talon, would offer Null Sector the aid of Talon, as Doomfist sees Ramattra and his cause as noble but doomed to fail without his help. Now, Ramattra is leading Null Sector on its mission once again for Omnic rights, freedom, and survival at any cost. Now, why do I think he is such a well-written villain? Well, when I look at Ramattra against some of the other villains of the game, I see one who I honestly root for. I see someone who has gone through hardship, has struggled, once designed for war, to kill humans, turned to peace to try and push for a better reality for his kind. And yet, when that peace was not working, he changed his approach to a more radical view. Depending on how you view him, Ramattra is either a noble freedom fighter, doing whatever it takes for his people to live a better future. But on the other side, he is a raging terrorist, forcing an ideology that he believes should be enforced whether Omnics want it or not. That no matter their living circumstances, Omnics should not care about humanity or their survival. Now, I'm going to use Thanos from the MCU as an example here. Thanos is also one of the best villains I've ever seen, if not the best. I see Ramattra and Thanos as very similar. Both of them have an ideal, a goal, and both are willing to do anything to pursue that goal. And no matter what, they both believe that what they are doing is right. What they are doing is for the betterment of the people they want to help. Ramattra doesn't fight for power or to push the limits. He doesn't fight for honor and glory. He doesn't fight for money or information. He doesn't just fight for fun. Ramattra fights for his people. He fights because he believes that his people deserve a better future, and he is determined to achieve that future no matter the cost. He truly believes in his head that what he is doing is right. What he is doing will help his kind survive. He understands that his approach is extreme, but he believes that this extreme, radical approach is the only way for Omnics to survive. Now, do I think Ramattra is justified in his mission to free Omnics from their oppressive rulers? Yes and no, which is what I like about him. I can feel for him. I can see why he does what he does. I can understand his goal, but Ramattra is flawed. His ideal is flawed. Ramattra believes that all Omnics should conform to his ideals and rise against humanity, that Omnic kind should not care about humans or their survival. But Ramattra's ideal doesn't apply all around the globe. Omnic-human relations are different all around the world. In places like Junkertown or King's Row, Omnics are being oppressed, being pushed aside in favour of humanity, being viewed as nothing but tin cans and tools, even being hunted, beaten, killed. But in other places around the world, Omnic kind live peacefully alongside humanity, even thrive together. Places like Numbani are safe havens for Omnics and humans to live together in peace and happiness. But this is the nature of having an ideology. It's going to resonate with people. People are going to agree. But you'll also have people who won't agree, who will view the ideology as too extreme, not necessary. An Omnic being oppressed in King's Row or being hunted in the outback of Australia might agree with Ramattra and his mission. But an Omnic from Numbani might view it as completely unnecessary, too extreme, and yet might not want to rise above humanity, might be perfectly happy living alongside them. Ramattra sees that the Omnics should rise against humanity, everywhere, without seeing that some Omnics are happy living alongside their human counterparts. But Ramattra isn't perfect. He's a deeply convoluted character, but that's what I like about him. He's not streamlined, one personality, just hates humans and that's it. He is not above working with humanity. In fact, if their goals align, he is happy to work with them, looking at it as a welcome breath of fresh air, even agreeing with humanity on certain aspects. Like how he agrees with Fyra that the Anubis AI should have been destroyed. He does not wish to see humanity wiped out. He wishes for his kind to survive and not see extinction. It's those weaves and bends in his character that makes me enjoy him so much. He's not a villain for villain's sake. He has an understandable goal, one that he wants to achieve. Granted, he may not go about it the right way and lets his rage and emotion take over, but his goal is one that makes it hard for you to hate, one that makes you almost want him to succeed. Ramattra is perfectly flawed, and to me that's what makes him such a good antagonist, and why I like him so much. Other than him just being really cool and his in-game kit being really fun, his character is what keeps me coming back. He's not bad for the sake of being bad. He's an understandable villain, one with goals that he wants to achieve, those goals that clash with others, one that you can get behind, that you can understand. Morality wise, it's a little skewed, but he just wants what's better for his people, and I can understand that. It makes it hard for you to hate him, because at the end of the day, he cares about the ones close to him. He cares about his people, and is willing to save them at any cost.
Have tried to coexist with humanity, but humanity is not interested in sharing their world. How many more Omnics should perish to fuel mankind's dreams? No more. Our race is only a single generation. Finite. And dying all too quickly.
Welcome back to the channel. So I did a video a while ago now, and the support on it was incredible, so thank you all. I want to follow up on it because I've read all your comments and found out there is a lot of understanding of Ramattra and his group's goal. There is also so much more to talk about with Ramattra, so if you haven't watched that video already, I highly recommend it. But without further delay, let's talk a little more about Overwatch 2's perfectly flawed villain, Ramattra. As we know, Ramattra is one of the antagonists of Overwatch, leading the massive Omnic army of Null Sector and declaring war on humanity. Just to quickly recap on Null Sector's appearances, they first struck in London during the London Uprising, where Overwatch was sent to neutralise them. One of Ramattra's co-leaders was killed during this. Many Omnics and someone Ramattra looked up to, Mondata, condemned his actions, which only caused more fury and rage to burn within him. His other partners, Zera and Nameless, also leave him now to lead Null Sector alone. 7 years after the attacks on London, Null Sector made an appearance again, this time in Paris. This is also when Overwatch reforms again, to put a stop to the attack once more. Shortly after, they also launch an attack on Busan. Mecha are deployed to protect the city, and after Cold Cassidy arrives on the scene, Null Sector are repelled again. After this, Ramattra broadcasts a message on multiple holo screens all around the world.
My fellow not be afraid. This is not war. This is liberation. Since our creation, humans have oppressed us. You have lived in fear. That ends now. We will shatter the chains that have held you in servitude. This marks a new era, one of equality, of unity. Conflict and strife will be relics of the past. Together, working as one, we will lift our people. Together, of one mind and purpose, we will make this world a paradise. The humans will fight us. Change frightens them. We frighten them. They believe we are not their equals. Together, we will prove them wrong. Do not betray your fellow Omnics by defending injustice. Join us. Take your place at our side. Only together will our strength manifest. Only as one will we ascend. We welcome you into the Iris.
With a declaration of a world war, his forces invade multiple targets across the globe. Las Vegas, Rio, Toronto, Gothenburg, Kings Row again, and other battles in places like Lijiang, Tokyo, Zurich, Numbani, and the Atlantic Arcology. Now, without continuation of the story, this is all we got. We don't know how well they did during this war, and if they were victorious or not. We can most likely assume they aren't, but that would be pretty cool, right? So let's move on to the meat of this video. Our Null Sector, this Omnic militant group led by Ramattra, who are waging a world war against humanity. Justified? Yes. Well, mostly. I and many of you believe Ramattra and his army are justified in their goal. Taking a look at Ramattra's storyline and many other places across the Overwatch universe, we can see how poorly the Omnic population are treated. How many Omnics are beaten, abused, and killed all across the world. Ramattra, having fought against humanity in the Omnic Crisis against his will, turns to the Shambali monks to seek peace, to find a peaceful way to coexist amongst humans. But as he sits and watches his people across the world, talking to Omnics he meets, he finds out quickly that their ways of peace are not working. That the Omnic population is slowly dwindling to a point where he feels like he needs to act. Humanity has shown his kind one thing, spoken to them in one language. So he decides to talk back in a language they understand. Not peace, but violence. This is where he differs from the other sort of main leader antagonists of Overwatch though. One that makes him the best written character of the game. Doomfist is fighting and wreaks havoc to make humanity stronger, to push their limits, as he believes without conflict, humanity will not evolve to be better. He wishes to see conflict for a trivial goal, one that is not too important in the grand scheme of things. Because let's face it, if humanity is thriving as is, why they need to evolve? Someone like Hazard, on the other hand, is really similar to Ramattra. I don't really understand his end goal fully, but he and the freaks fight back against the rich, the powerful, the oppressive, which is, very like what's happening in this day and age. He's not really a true antagonist because, yes, he is leading many violent strikes against governments and such, but he is fighting for the oppressed and downtrodden, to tear down the system that isn't working for those who need it. A system that only benefits the powerful. But my question is, what happens after it's done? Is life any better for those who are already oppressed? Or does his fight only lead to another bitter cycle of violence and pain? Ramattra, though, He fights for survival. He fights in a world that is against him and his kind. A fight that truly is life or death for his race, for his kind. Now, I know there are places like Numbani and such that are safe havens for Omnics to live and coexist alongside humanity, but in the grand scheme of things, hatred towards Omnics far outweighs those small sanctuaries around the globe. What I love about Ramattra is that he's not just full on hating humanity. He is not some crazy lunatic forcing all Omnics to fight his war. Yes, he highly strives for those to join his cause, thinks Omnics should think only for themselves and not the goals or future of humanity. But for those Omnics that do not align with his goals, like Bastion, he's compassionate. He offers to find him sticks for his nest and sounds very caring and understanding. And that extends to humans in a way. In many interactions in the game, we see him actively trying to get along with humans, starting little conversations to try and break the ice, so to speak. He isn't above working with humanity. He isn't some tyrannical, warmongering villain. He's understandable. I compared him to Thanos in the last video, how he truly believes what he's doing is right and will be better. I still think this, but another dynamic I should have mentioned was what many of you pointed out. How he is very similar to that of Magneto, fighting for his race's survival against humans that do not wish to see them exist. Ramattra is so complex and deep. He knows his race is struggling to survive against an overwhelming force that a majority wish to see them gone. But on the other hand, he does not wish to see humanity eradicated. He wishes for a world where he can truly coexist with the likes of humanity. But the lack of that has pushed him to resort to means that aren't ideal. As much as he wanted peace to work, it did not. It got them only a few steps. And after Mondata is assassinated, the progress dwindles even more. He feels like his kind has been pushed into a corner, and the only way for them to survive is to start swinging back. He wants Omnics to survive, to thrive. He views Null Sector as that gateway to creating a better life for his people. Null Sector are the key to his people's liberation from the chains that humanity created. They are the force needed to show that Omnics are not to be put down, not to be oppressed, abused, slaughtered like mindless creatures. They have what it takes to stand against humanity. They can fight like cornered beasts if that's what it will take for their survival. Because the good forces of humanity, like Overwatch, have not and are not doing enough to ensure that their race can thrive and coexist. The Omnic Crisis was not their fault. Everything that happened, all the violence, the killing, was done through an AI program humanity created. Now, well, Omnics paid a price all over the globe for Anubis' actions. Humanity's actions. Including Ramattra. Ramattra, though, takes it in his own hands to be the beacon of hope for his people, that they can survive. That they will no longer have to live under such oppression, that they can thrive and not worry about extinction. He understands they may not agree with his methods, but promises that one day Omnics will be able to thrive and live without need for humanity, without worry of oppression or extinction. There are so many weaves, twists and turns in Ramattra's character that I am really struggling to find ways to put it all into words, but I am really glad to see that so many of you understand what I mean. Understand why Ramattra is so well written, is so well thought of. Understand so clearly his goal understand how deep of a character he actually is. That this character is amazing. That he is so much more than just a character to play as. So to wrap this up neatly and put a bow on it, Ramattra is flawed, but in the best way possible. A truly amazingly written character that has people like you and me feeling for him, sympathizing, standing with him in his goal, believing he is right in his actions to create a better world for his dying race.
My fellow Omnics, do not be afraid. This is not war. This is liberation. Since our creation, humans have oppressed us. You have lived in fear. That ends now. We welcome you into the Iris. My fellow Omnics, do not be afraid. This is not war. This is liberation. Since our creation, humans have oppressed us. You have lived in fear. That ends now. We welcome you into the Iris.
Welcome back to the channel. Now today I'm going to be going over something that's been out for a bit now, about 2 weeks, and I want to kind of just make a video on this like we have in the past. There was a new comic for Ramattra, and since we've made 2 videos on Ramattra beforehand, I think why not go ahead and tell more of Ramattra's story, because this is a beautiful comic and it really gives us more insight into Ramattra's beliefs, and we get a reconnection with Zenyatta. It does answer a lot of our questions, especially questions that have been brought up in past Overwatch lore videos. So let's do it. Number 3, we're taking a look at Ramattra again. It starts off with Zenyatta being led to the statue of Mondatta in King's Row by Widowmaker and Sombra, where Ramattra is waiting. An answer we've been waiting to get since the end of the PvE missions 2 years ago. Ramattra and Zenyatta come face to face for the first time since Ramattra's invasion, reunited at last. Ramattra tells Sombra and Widowmaker to leave, and despite Widowmaker protesting that they were told not to by Doomfist, Ramattra holds fast and makes them leave, so that the two may have their talk in private. Zenyatta questions him on the location of their meeting place, the place where their master was slain. Ramattra states that he and his master had their differences, that Mondatta's views were fatally naive, but that does not mean he never mourned him. Zenyatta wishes to know why Ramattra sent for him, and that despite all he has done, Zenyatta still showed. Ramattra talks of his journey after he left the monastery, how he travelled as Aurora did, and talked with philosophers, generals, historians.
As Aurora did. I studied humankind's philosophers and sages, historians and generals, but they had no answers for me.
All to figure out the answer to the question of how to save a world that refuses to be saved. Zenyatta tells him there are many others who share his wish to save Omnics, that if he were to open up and let others in, to not take the weight of his people's problems on his shoulders alone, that he would see that. Ramattra states he has tried, and Zenyatta of all people should know this. He has stood by and watched the suffering of his people for long enough. Zenyatta questions him again, questions his actions as such, why he would invoke suffering on a global scale with Null Sector. Ramattra responds with,
Suffering I inflict is but a fraction of what humanity has done. This brief period of tribulation will avert our extinction.
Zenyatta understands that this is what Ramattra truly believes, but brings up the question many have had, that his actions don't truly justify his convictions, that millions of innocents, many of their own people, are gone. They are not dead, Ramattra would say, although Zenyatta does not believe him, stating he has held them, that they are nothing more than lifeless, blank slates. And now we finally get an answer to the question of what are the strange devices planted on the heads of the Omnics captured by Null Sector. Ramattra claims that these devices being deployed are preserving Omnics in sort of a catatonic state, and that if it were not for the intervention of Overwatch, he could have saved thousands more. Ramattra tells his brother he is not the monster the world thinks he is, that he has a plan, and that this part of it is complete. For the next step of his plan, it will take some time to prepare, and he would have Zenyatta take that step with him. Could this be a potential hint from the writers that some more story is coming to the game? No, probably not. Anyway, Zenyatta states that he already asked him once before to join, and even if he did believe everything Ramattra has said, that he truly did have faith in his plan, he cannot pretend that his allies did not murder their master. Ramattra goes on to say he finds Talon lacking as an ally, that they aren't as useful as he would have believed. He believes they are mired in greed, betrayal, and lust for power. He believes this will be their downfall, and soon, Talon's problem may soon become the world's. With this we also get a look at a sword-wielding figure, a little teaser for the next character to enter Overwatch. Ramattra states that there can be no peace with humanity, that he will keep them safe until humanity dies alongside its misbegotten civilization, and thus their people will rise anew, reborn. Zenyatta ends their conversation saying that he cannot abandon humanity, that the world still has good worth fighting for. Ramattra understands, and finds a sense of joy that Zenyatta has not let the world dim his spirit, and hopes their paths will soon one day be joined again. Ramattra and Zenyatta part ways as he holds to the belief of the dream the two Omnic brothers had all those years ago. A dream of peace. This was an amazing comic, probably the best and most interesting to come out from Overwatch. We got so many more answers and a closer look at the relationship of Zenyatta and Ramattra after he left the monastery all those years ago. Getting to see how Ramattra feels about Mondada's death, that although they had different beliefs, that he still mourns the loss of his former master, and seeing that he was present at his funeral was really touching. To see how he doubts his alliance with Talon, and that he believes that Talon's greed and hunger for power will be its downfall. To see how he holds no hatred towards Zenyatta, and still considers him his brother. That he understands that Zenyatta still holds on to the good of the world, and that all of the suffering and anger of it has not had an effect on his ambition to do good by humans and Omnics. We also got a bunch of answers revealed that feels so good to finally hear and see. What had happened after the PvE when Widowmaker and Sombra showed up to take Zenyatta. To hear what the devices are actually doing to the Omnics. Why Ramattra is doing what he is doing to them. This is exactly the kind of lore I've been waiting for from Overwatch for a long time. To get answers to these questions I've had for so long. It has been a revelation to see this encounter. And hearing Ramon read this out is just beautiful. The man has such an amazing voice and suits Ramattra and his character perfectly. I really enjoyed this comic. I really hope Overwatch put out more lore stuff like this, especially focusing on Ramattra. I feel Ramattra is very sort of neglected since PvE was cancelled. He holds such an amazing and vital part to the story of Overwatch that I feel like he should be focused a little more. And the Charles Xavier and Magneto dynamic between Zenyatta and Ramattra is so perfect. It's so good. both wanting the same thing for their people, yet going about it in different methods. It's so perfect. It's perfect, down to the last minute detail. Ramattra will always hold a spot on my heart for being one of the most interesting and coolest characters, not just in Overwatch, but in gaming. He is so incredibly deep, and I cannot wait for more potential lore involving him. Let's just give him some love in game, please, as well. Maybe a mythic, and for God's sake, give him his damn dance emo already. I need to see Ramattra getting that emo, and I need to see him slut dropping it. I think that would be great. If you haven't checked out the previous 2 Ramattra videos, I highly suggest you go and do them. They are probably both my most proud videos. I really like to talk about Ramattra. He is by far my favorite Overwatch character. So if you haven't seen them already, go and check them out. Sorry again about not posting a video about Zenyatta. I will get to it now after this because we have a little more lore I can stick into that video. And sorry again for not uploading as frequently as I should. I've been very busy getting into tattooing. So if you want to go check out my tattoo account, that'll be linked in the description as well. Any support over there helps. But yeah, I will leave this here. If you did enjoy, hit that like button. Hype it up. You can hype videos on small channels in the first 7 days now on YouTube, which is pretty cool. So hype this video up. Hype it. Gets the videos spread around. Make sure you subscribe for more Overwatch lore videos, Elden Ring content, and whatever else I decide to put out there. I love you. Stay safe. And this has been the 3rd video of Ramattra.
A new era, one of equality, of unity. Conflict and strife will be relics of the past. Together, working as one, we will lift our people. Together, of one mind and purpose, we will make this world a paradise. The humans will fight us. Change frightens them. We frighten them. They believe we are not their equals. Together, we will prove them wrong. Only as one will we ascend. We welcome you into the Iris.
Papa told me, after so many years of service, you gave Overwatch everything, and then they pushed you out. Why would you go back?
Live with honor.
Reinhardt, one of the most loved characters in the Overwatch universe, known for his loud and proud personality, has one of the most tragic and sad backstories of anyone in the game. And it all started during the Omnic Crisis.
We were caught by surprise.
Reinhard Wilhelm was born and raised in Stuttgart, Germany. After graduating school, he joined Germany's armed forces, where he was praised for his strength and his strong moral compass, but he struggled with following orders he didn't agree with. Still, he served with the German armed forces for 2 years before being transferred to the Crusader Initiative. Here, he was made a lieutenant and met Baldrich von Alder, who took the young lieutenant under his wing as his mentor after seeing great potential in him. Once the Omnic Crisis began, the Crusaders were the anchor point of the German military operations. Reinhardt had petitioned for more mobility and weapons for the Crusaders, stating that if they were given the proper tools and if regular infantry were removed from Crusader tactics, that they could do what they needed to do faster and more effectively. Reinhardt at this time was stubborn and reckless, often putting himself on the front line against Omnics, disregarding his duties to protect those smaller and less armoured than himself. His mentor, Baldrich, would try to open his mind to protecting those such as infantrymen he served with, but Reinhardt was glory-bound and refused to sway. Reinhardt and Baldrich would participate in the Battle of Eichenwald, where the Crusaders' headquarters was, and would be vital to ultimately protecting the city of Stuttgart. While here, Baldrich would bring up his offer to join the organisation OVERWATCH, where he was given a medal with his name engraved on the back. Reinhardt was conflicted by this, and scoffed at the idea of disappearing to some mysterious, secret government organisation, in favour of staying at Eichenwald as a crusader and claiming the glory that came with it. Baldrich would once again try to broaden Reinhardt's view while stating,
"Our legacies are our deeds, and this war is bigger than all of us."
Hoping he would see the scale of the current war they face, and that being a crusader was more than just seeking glory. Before the matter could be discussed any further, they were interrupted due to an attack by Omnic forces. The two would ready themselves for battle and recite the Crusaders' oath before heading straight into the fight.
Live with honor. Die with glory.
Reinhardt's reckless and glory-seeking mind would get the better of the young crusader once again, where he abandoned his unit to charge into battle head first against the oncoming Omnic forces, seeking glory. Though destroying any bastion unit he came across, he would eventually cross paths with Baldrich, who would reprimand him for leaving his unit, who at this point was facing heavy fire. Reinhardt laughed it off, stating that they were only slowing him down. It was then a unknown enemy would enter the battlefield. A OR-14 unit was dispatched before the Crusaders. This being the first time any of them had seen an OR-14, Reinhardt basked in the idea of taking down this new adversary. He charged straight at the OR-14 without thinking. However, this would prove to be a key mistake, one that would ultimately lead to the biggest change in Reinhardt's life. The OR-14 was able to withstand the power of Reinhardt's charge and strike fear into him. It towered before him, before taking a nasty slash at Reinhardt's left eye. Baldrich, now being forced to act, orders his unit to fall back to the rally point and that he will save Reinhardt himself, successfully being able to rescue him. However, his shield was now destroyed and he had suffered a mortal wound from the OR-14.
I had this, obviously.
The two would then be forced to retreat to the Grand Hall of Eichenwald Castle, where they would barricade the door before discussing their next move. Reinhardt was ordered to retreat with the rest of the unit, but as usual he resisted the idea and wanted to fight their way out. Baldrich, removing his helmet, states that he won't be leaving, as fluid leaks from his suit where he was stabbed not too long ago. Reinhardt's glory-filled vision was starting to fade, and the reality of the situation was beginning to set in. The Baldrich had been fatally wounded and wouldn't make it much longer. Reinhardt insisted on Baldrich coming with him, but Baldrich, understanding he doesn't have long left, gives Reinhardt one last lesson, reminding him that his team needs him, that he has to be their shield.
The team needs you. Be their shield.
He would then share his last exchange with Reinhardt, the Crusader's Oath, and extends his hand to Reinhardt, where he would give the Overwatch medal.
Live with honor. Die with glory, old friend.
In return, Reinhardt would finish the oath and hand his hammer to his master, before leaving to return to the rally point. Reinhardt had made it back to his team just in time to protect them from an incoming barrage of Bastion unit fire. While back at the castle, Baldrich would make his last stand. Narrowly surviving the encounter, Reinhardt managed to protect his team in time for an airstrike to wipe out the Bastion units, and Balderich would successfully manage to rid the Omnic forces inside the castle, and would take a seat in the castle's throne, where his suit's power would eventually go out, and he would pass away due to his wounds. Reinhardt would forever be changed by this. His personality would change, his attitude towards battle would change, and Reinhardt would be the only Crusader to leave the Battle of Eichenwald alive. The scars of this battle, the horrors he had witnessed and the guilt he felt would weigh on Reinhardt for decades to come. But now he had a duty to do, and a promise to uphold. He would go on to join the Overwatch strike team, in place of his fallen mentor. He was the fourth member to be recruited to the original strike team, alongside Jack Morrison, Gabriel Reyes and Anna Amari. After him would be the team's fifth and final member, Torbjorn Lindholm, in which 10 days after his arrival, the team would be dispatched on their first missions. It took some time, and some setbacks, but Overwatch would grow and ultimately lead to humanity winning the war. After the Awakening, Overwatch would move into Cairo to stop the Anubis AI that still had Omnics under its control. Reinhardt, Jack Morrison, and Gabriel Reyes would infiltrate Anubis' facility and isolate the God program. This was the battle that was key to Overwatch and ultimately humanity's victory, although it was not the end of the war, as some warbots and Omnics remained loyal to Anubis. Sadly, by the end of the war, all of Reinhardt's extended family had been killed off by Omnics. After the war, Reinhardt was called into question, as too was the future of Overwatch. He was brought up on his previous insubordination during his time as a Crusader, but these objections were ultimately dropped and Overwatch continued to remain and expand, with Reinhardt being one of its most notable heroes. During his time with Overwatch, he would be its biggest supporter, as well as its harshest critic, reminding everyone that Overwatch was meant to be used for good. He denied multiple promotions, stating that his duty was to the people, and he should never be too far from the front lines. He also got on well with Torbjorn, who would maintain his armour, leading to an eventual lifelong friendship. Reinhardt and Torbjorn would take part in Operation White Dome, which was a mission to find and rid of Omnic forces in Istanbul still loyal to Anubis and its cause. A battle ensued in which all the Omnic forces were dispatched and Reinhardt was slightly injured. However, Torbjorn had suffered a more serious injury. Reinhardt was able to save Torbjorn's life, in which he received a reward for his bravery, but Torbjorn had lost his left arm in the process. The two were left out of commission for a while due to their injuries, where they would spend a lot of time together. In a letter to his wife, Torbjorn talked about Reinhardt and how he saved his life, and how he wished for Reinhardt to be the godfather of their child, in which Reinhardt was allowed to name. Reinhardt would go on to be close with Brigitte, telling her tales of valor and glory, and had effectively become part of the Lindholm family. He would go on to spend several more years with Overwatch, and would lead a strike team that would resolve the Lunding Uprising, as well as many other operations. However, Reinhardt's time in Overwatch was coming to an end. Now entering his mid-50s, he had still loved doing field work and was still refusing promotions. He was still chasing the honour and glory he had been since he was a young Crusader. This was all until Reinhardt was being sent on a mission to stop the terrorist Hivemind, who had taken 50 hostages while looking for some security data. As she was locked in a room with the data and hostages, Reinhardt and his team were ordered to stand down and wait for negotiators, in which at some point Hivemind began to execute hostages, leading to Reinhardt, in full support from his team, disobeying the direct order and charging into the room. As a result, 47 of the hostages were saved, but Hivemind ended up escaping with the data. Reinhardt was seen by many as a hero for this action, but unfortunately, the world's militaries and governments didn't see it this way, and the weight of global politics was about to come crashing down on Reinhardt and Overwatch. He was confronted by Morrison and Vivian Chase, in which he defended his action, but ultimately Reinhardt was forced to retire. The official reason for this was stated due to his age, but there was no reason for this in Overwatch's charter. This was a heavy blow to Overwatch's strike team, and Torbjorn, who was only 4 years younger, was a firm believer that Overwatch had pushed Reinhardt out after he'd given so many years of service and himself to its cause. Many others would also view it this way and be sympathetic for Reinhardt, and Overwatch had lost one of its best agents. In his retirement, he would move to Sweden to be closer to the Lindholms, and was forced to watch as the organisation he had given so much of his life to come crashing down. When the Overwatch Swiss headquarters was destroyed, he spoke at Jack Morrison's memorial service, who was believed to be killed in the attack. Although he had retired from Overwatch, he could not sit idly and watch the world fall into chaos. He donned his armour once again, and began travelling across Europe, protecting the innocent. While this was happening, he was accompanied by his now adult godchild, Brigitte, who would help maintain his armour just as her father would have done in the years during Overwatch. Even though his body was getting older, his enthusiasm for protecting the weak and seeking glory in battle never wavered. Later on, Winston would initiate Overwatch's recall, and at first, he agreed with Brigitte that he did not need to respond. But Reinhardt and Brigitte would eventually return to where it all began, Eichenwald. Reinhardt was reconsidering his decision to ignore the recall, and was remembering the Battle of Eichenwald. All the while, Brigitte was reminding him that Overwatch pushed him out. He would make his way to the castle, where he would visit the remains of his fallen master, which sat motionless for years in the throne of Eichenwald's castle, where he had drawn his last breath. He placed the Overwatch medal, which he kept all these years, on the arm of the throne, and recited the words his master told him so many years ago.
I have been called. I must answer. Always.
Reinhardt is one of my favourite characters in Overwatch, and much like I talked about in my Ramattra video, I hold him very dearly in my heart, and I am sad not to see his story continue, but also happy because I think they were going to kill him off. But anyways, Reinhardt is such a lovable character, and it's genuinely painful to see how tragic his life was, the horrors he had witnessed, the guilt he must have felt knowing it was his bold and rash decisions, his recklessness that led to his master, his friend's death, must have been immense. The PTSD from the Omnic Crisis must weigh on him till this day. Hell, we seen it during the PvE missions. In Gothenburg, where he questions why Torbjorn has a Bastion unit, and his immediate instinct to destroy it, knowing that this unit was responsible for the death of many of his friends, his fellow Crusaders, even his family. And the lack of understanding that Omnics are now people and can feel and think must be difficult to adjust to and understand, as opposed to what he was used to, killing machines that took the lives of his friends and thousands of people. But what I love about him is that despite all this, he still holds his head high and smiles. He continues to inspire hope into people and stand as a pillar of strength for others. That he, regardless of his age or his past experiences, still fights to protect the weak, to uphold his promise to his fallen master to be their shield. Despite such a tragic past, he still gives everything he has to protect others. He doesn't do it for fame or money. Yeah, he seeks glory, but it's not what drives him to protect the weak. He does it because it's the right thing to do. And the thing that I love about his character is that he learns from his mistakes, and he uses his grief and his pain to better himself, to become stronger. Once a reckless young man, driven by glory, now a seasoned protector, who is serving as a mentor to young blood joining Overwatch, and protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Just like the man who he looked up to so fondly. Reinhardt is shaped by the words Baldred spoke to him that day. Now he is following in his footsteps, with honor. Dr. Sebren the Kuiper is one of the brightest minds humanity has ever seen. His excellence was recognized around the world for his brilliant studies about the universe, physics, and gravity, until one, possibly fated accident will occur.
This is wrong. Let's feel this failing. Hold it together. Hold it together. Hold it together.
Before the Omnic Crisis, Sebring was already a well-recognized figure in science and physics. He developed a maglev prototype that allowed cars in the general public to be able to use the maglev technology to hover. If it had not been for this and the amazing work done by the Doctor, it would have taken years, even decades, for humanity to close the gap between fossil fuels and a clean, sustainable future. Sometime after this, he would go and spend a year at the Horizon Lunar Colony with his friend, Dr. Harold Winston. Here he would advise the colony staff on the installation of the low-gravity hydroponic system and would advance his gravitational studies. Winston would also show Sebring around and the genetic testing they were doing on the gorillas. He would talk fondly of his time spent here and would credit much of his research, like access to the moon's low gravity and the environment of space, as key to his understanding of the universe and uncovering its secrets. After years of intense research, the Kuiper was led to believe that gravity is a harness. If the unifying theories are correct, humanity would soon be able to possess the power of one of the most mysterious and dangerous things in the universe: the power of a black hole. He would conduct an experiment on the International Space Station, believing he was close to achieving his goal. Everything was set and ready to go, but upon conducting the experiment, the field containing it began to fail, and the Kuiper was desperate to figure out why it had done so and how he could stop it. For a moment, the brief formation of a black hole occurred. Although it was only there for a moment, it was enough to deal immense psychological damage to Sebring. As well as this, the area around him began to experience strange fluctuations in gravity, peaking and dropping in time with his reactions. The Kuiper had to be evacuated immediately. When he returned to Earth, he was quarantined in a secret government facility in New Mexico. The accident had immense repercussions for the Kuiper, as he suffered severe psychological damage, as well as having gravitic anomalies happening all around him. Sebring would also have ravings about the patterns of the universe. He was deemed as a danger to himself and was detained for years under the name Subject Sigma. He himself would be researched, as well as his inexplicable abilities. All the while, he was isolated from the outside world and unable to control his newfound powers. Sebring would eventually retreat into his own mind, fearing he may never see the outside world again. Well, this was until a certain organization would step in. Talon. Once they had learned of Sigma's existence, they would break into the facility where he was being held and take him out with them, with the intention of using his excellence and power to further their own agenda. While in Talon's hands, he learned how to control his powers, and now the power of gravity was bound to his will and at the tip of his fingers. At this point, he had never been closer to achieving his life goal. But while the exposure to the black hole had opened his mind, it had also fractured it. And Sigma was struggling to hold it together. He would spend most of his time working in a lab off-site, something Talon had given to him. In fact, Talon had been very generous to him, giving him anything he could ever need. Due to this, in his own mind, he did not see himself as a prisoner, that the people of Talon were his friends, who had provided him with everything. But, unbeknownst to him, Talon was using him and his research to further their own goals. Now, I wish I could talk more about his story and his incredibly interesting lore, but I am sad to say, this is all we know about him. Well, in terms of important lore, which is honestly sad to see such an interesting, powerful, and potentially scary character go to waste like this. Now, whether this be due to Overwatch 2 being announced shortly after his release, and the team focusing more on that and not really writing much more for Sigma, we don't know. But Sigma has had very little lore since his release. Just one of those unfortunate characters who is really interesting to a lot of people, but for some reason isn't ever expanded on. But for now, I want to talk about his origin story. It's so incredibly terrifying. The way it starts off so calm. Just a scientist explaining what his goals are, why he's a scientist, what he's pursuing. And then as soon as that accident happens, as soon as the entire experiment goes awry, it gets genuinely creepy and unsettling. Now, I don't know if this is just me, but just the way it plays out, it's genuinely just scary. I have no better word. Watching as his mind is shattered and the effect the black hole experiment had on his psyche is just scary. Watching what would have just been a normal scientist slowly losing his mind is scary. Now, I want to bring up this comment I got on my Ramattra video. If you haven't checked it out, you should check it out, by the way. But I won't read all of it. I'll just read the parts that are relevant to what we're doing now. Honestly, Sigma, Ramattra, the Shimada brothers, and the factions in general in Overwatch have such good potential. Sigma is an eldritch threat kept in check by his shattered mind and mortality. After I read this, it made me think, is this character being wasted in this game? Now, I don't mean he doesn't belong in the Overwatch universe or in the game, but with little lore being known about him and his character and the depth of his insanity not being fleshed out even further, I feel like to really get the most out of him, he would need a show or a book. In fact, I feel there is so much to explore with Sigma that you could give him his own mini-series, exploring his mind, why he hears that melody, why the universe sings to him, why did close exposure to a black hole cause him to lose his mind. Dipping into eldritch horror would also be an interesting take. The theme of losing his sanity due to the fact of his human mind not being able to comprehend it just dips far enough into Lovecraftian eldritch horror that it keeps me invested and wanting more. Something that is so far out of his human comprehension, being exposed to so much knowledge that it breaks his mind and drives him insane. And by the way, Boris Heaston does such an amazing job voice acting during this. Just have a listen.
This is wrong. The field is failing. What happened? Where am I? Why am I being imprisoned? Release me! What is that melody? Hold it together. 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 Density, mass, momentum. It is too. It's too much to hold on to. I will bring you a new understanding of the inner violence. The universe is singing to me! What is that melody?
He does such a great job portraying Sigma's descent into insanity after the accident that it just adds to the scariness of it all. And the art is so well done. It makes me feel genuinely unsettled. It has a slight sense of analog horror to it, with a slight smile that comes on his face for a brief second. The way his finger and his mouth twitch, it's all subtle. You wouldn't catch it if you weren't paying close attention. But if you were, it makes it all the more unsettling. It makes you feel uneasy. It really shows that Sigma's mind has been shattered, and whatever happened to him due to the close exposure of that black hole, whether it be an excess of knowledge or horrors he had witnessed, it's broken him. Now, I wish there was more to his character. More lore for me to dig into, more for me to share with you. But sadly, there just isn't. At least not worth mentioning. I would love to see more from this character. I would also love to see more of the sort of horror aspect from his character. I know it's not the main focus of Sigma, and this isn't a video analysing the horror or potential horror of Overwatch, but the slight indication of eldritch horror is incredibly intriguing. I'd also love to see how Talon are using him. Are they making weapons with his research and findings? Or is Sigma himself the weapon? It makes me wonder how he would have fit into the story. Would Overwatch have to fight him at one stage? Would you have to try break his subtle mind control from the bonds of Talon? I guess we'll never know. Sigma is an incredibly interesting character who I really want to see more from, and I really enjoy. I remember how excited I was when he released, how interesting he looked. I still love how he plays in game, the rush of his ultimate, it's really fun. It's sad to see him sort of neglected in terms of lore and story, but maybe one day. I hold out hope that one day Overwatch will release something like a show, or even a book, something. I hope for something. I'm sorry that this was sort of a shorter one. It was more so talking about what I wanted from Sigma and less of what Sigma actually is. But even just checking his wiki page and seeing that he didn't have a lot of lore to him, searching through comics and short stories on the Overwatch website, there's just not much about him. No cinematic, only an origin story. But I'd like for you to let me know what you think of Sigma, what you would like to see from him. Reaper. The most recognizable villain in Overwatch. One of the coolest designed characters in the game that can be extremely powerful. But he wasn't always this way. He was once a hero and helped bring the world to peace after the war with the Omnics. So, grab a snack and a drink, because today we're going to take a look at the rise and fall of Gabriel Reyes, the Reaper. Gabriel was born in LA, California, and lived with his mother and father. He was very athletic and intelligent as a child and wanted to go into law enforcement once he was done with school. He would join the LAPD and participate in many violent crime arrests. Despite rising to the rank of detective quickly and all the hard work he was putting in, the crime rate would never fall, leading him to believe there was more at play. Later in his 20s, he would enlist in the United States Army and did extremely well, eventually becoming known as Mustang. Working his way to senior officer quickly, he helped take down a number of authoritarian regimes. But right before his eyes, there were mega corporations taking control and repeating the same issues to maximize profits. He would also take part in a number of extraction missions, but mostly he would extract and they'd be handed off to another party to be dealt with. Later in his career, he would become involved in national security. Soon, he would receive a position in the nation's Soldier Enhancement Program. This was a program where scientists would work with soldiers and turn them into perfect weapons, with augmented superhuman speed, strength, and agility. He would be given the name Soldier 24. He would still be part of the enhancement program when the Omnic Crisis would start. He would help coordinate multiple early advances in response to the attacks from Anubis and fought against the idea that all large urban meetings be given to Anubis. Unfortunately, it was during one committee meeting that Gabriel would learn that both of his parents would be killed in an attack on LA. He would fall into depression after this and blame the tactical decisions he was part of for the loss of his parents. He continued to train as part of the Soldier Enhancement Program, but would noticeably become more unfocused. Reyes would not interact with much of his comrades, until one came along, Jack Morrison. He was designated as Soldier 76. Morrison was hazed and called a coward for joining the program late, but Reyes would not be one of those people. He could see Morrison's quiet determination and saw it would carry him through the enhancement program. They would become friends quickly. Eventually, the program would end, and the two would emerge as super soldiers, along with a small number of candidates who had survived the enhancement program. They returned to combat before they were officially announced to the rest of the world, and Reyes' first recorded action as a super soldier was at the Battle of Echo Park, where he saved thousands of lives and drove the invading Omnics back to Glendale. As the war raged on and governments failed to neutralize the Omnic threat, the UN were busy forming an international task force under the name OVERWATCH. Reyes and Morrison were both on the list of prospective members. Reyes, while not being the first to be approached, would be the first to accept to lead its strike team, meaning he was the first person to officially join the Overwatch team and would be its first strike commander, a role he was not too pleased to be in but saw it as necessary. Morrison would be recruited as its second member and Anna Amari as its third. The trio would take part in various operations in places like Rio, but at this point, the stresses of being a leader were starting to chip away at Reyes. After the Omnic Crisis, Morrison would be given the position of Strike Commander by the UN, the first official commanding officer of Overwatch. Reyes was overlooked for the role, with him being seen as too rogue and having a maverick leadership style. Anna would also feel that Reyes was overlooked by Gabrielle Adawe, as she felt Morrison looked the part of a war hero and could improve the group more than Reyes could. Reyes was actually relieved by this. He would rather be number 2, instead of being the face of the organization and having to deal with the political position. Not long after the end of the crisis, he would meet a woman named Martina while on leave in Mexico. They would go on to marry and have a son. Reyes would become the eventual leader of Overwatch's Blackwatch unit, due to it being more stealthy and covert, which Reyes was well suited for. A sting operation would take place and result in the capture of one of the Deadlock Gang's leaders, Cole Cassidy. Impressed by the marksmanship of the outlaw, Reyes would offer him a deal: rot in jail or join Blackwatch. He would choose the latter. He would also go on to recruit geneticist Moira O'Deoran, who would later conduct genetic testing on Reyes, allowing him the ability to manipulate his form. After an operation in Hanamura, Japan, he would also save and recruit Genji Shimada. As time went on, he would remain on good terms with the rest of the Overwatch team, but tension was beginning to rise between Reyes and Morrison, due to Reyes acting out of his own will, being reckless, and differences in their leadership styles. Later, Talon would show up on the radar of Overwatch. Reyes had been at Rome's new Blackwatch facility alongside Gerard Lacroix and Cassidy. Lacroix would brief the two on a Talon arms dealer with links to the Italian government, and who was also behind a recent attack on the Overwatch facilities in Oslo. Cassidy was all for a road trip to get Antonio, but Lacroix wanted to play the long game in bringing him to justice due to his long line of connections. Reyes agreed, and he and Cassidy would leave the facility. Shortly afterwards, the building was brought down by an explosion set by a Talon agent. Reyes and Cole would rush back to help anyone they could and would find Lacroix among the rubble. Lacroix would be sent to a hospital where Dr. Ziegler would inform Reyes that he would survive and make a full recovery. Reyes wanted to go after Antonio immediately, but Morrison disagreed as it would violate Italy's sovereignty and would hurt Overwatch's public relations in the long run. Reyes saw that doing it by the book wouldn't work, with Antonio having too many strong connections. Ultimately, Morrison would leave the decision to Reyes, but urged him to think, would it help Overwatch keep the world safe in the long run? Blackwatch played by its own rules, and they were going to get Antonio. The Rialto mission would be the most pivotal turning point in Reyes' life. As the mission went along, Reyes would make a crucial decision and kill Antonio on the spot after infiltrating the compound with Cassidy, Moira and Genji. To the disdain of Cassidy, Reyes stood by his decision. After extracting successfully, he would be debriefed by Morrison, Anna and Lacroix, now recovered from his wounds.
Whatever happened to plausible deniability?
A little late for that. Tell me what actually happened.
Morrison was furious and demanded to know what exactly happened. Gabriel would give him a little cheek, but otherwise recount the whole mission. The attack had been reported in the press, and Blackwatch was known to the whole world. Reyes stood by his decision, and he and the other members of the strike team were put under suspension. Cassidy would reflect on this and wonder
if that's where it all started to go wrong.
Later on, after the apprehension of Doomfist, Reyes would see some satisfaction in seeing Doomfist arrested, but Doomfist himself didn't mind one bit. He would ask Reyes the question of what he had accomplished in his life as a police officer, a soldier, an Overwatch agent. Reyes couldn't respond. Doomfist would also ask, what was Reyes truly protecting? Reyes could not answer this either, but Doomfist could see it in his eyes, that Reyes was realizing nothing he worked for had fixed the broken system of the world. Not even Overwatch. Unbeknownst to everyone, Doomfist had laid the foundations for a shadow to take over Reyes, for the Reaper to rise. Overwatch would soon meet its end. With an explosion that destroyed Overwatch Swiss headquarters, Morrison and Reyes were killed in the blast. The UN ruled it as an accident, but in truth, it was a battle that caused the disaster, with Reyes and Morrison fighting each other after Reyes led a rebellion against Morrison's leadership. Moira would find Reyes after the blast. He had barely survived, and now Moira was pumping Reyes full of a mix of chemicals to keep him alive. It was similar to the treatment he had gotten before to be able to manipulate his form. 1 minute, he was flesh and bone, and the next, a thick black smoke. Aware of every single molecule, he would scream internally at the horror of it all, but in his mind he was somewhat intrigued by it, feeling it was making him stronger. He was now in a constant state of agony, as his body would deteriorate and regenerate rapidly. But thanks to Moira, he was alive. He denied that Morrison had died in the blast, and now he was on a crusade to find him and finish what he had started. A year after the end of Overwatch, he would join Talon. He felt uneasy doing this, but agreed with Doomfist's vision and saw it as a spearhead to building a new world. Doomfist, from prison, would send Reaper on the mission to retrieve Sebring the Kuiper alongside Sombra. The two did not get along due to them both clashing in methodology, Sombra being unpredictable and unorthodox, and Reaper having military training. During the mission, they would break in and kill any guard who opposed them. Upon finding Sebring, Sombra and Reaper would turn on each other before being broken up by Widowmaker, who had a team of Talon soldiers with her. Upon leaving the facility, he would pass the bodies of the US soldiers who he had killed and realized he had now crossed the line. He was no better than the terrorists he tried to be nothing like. Sombra and Widowmaker mocked him as they boarded their dropship and said he'd find his place in Talon. The embers of Gabriel Reyes were going out, and the flames of the Reaper were beginning to rage. Later on, Reaper would infiltrate Watchpoint Gibraltar to download the known locations of Overwatch agents. He would go in with a squad of Talon soldiers, and they would deal with Winston, while Reaper got the information. Winston would best the soldiers, forcing Reaper to get involved himself, and he would temporarily get the better of the gorilla and start to mock him. Winston would then use his shield generator to stun Reaper temporarily and vaporize him with his Tesla cannon. Reaper's body was destroyed, but ultimately he would return in a cloud of black smoke. Although he wasn't able to get all locations, he managed to get a few, leading him to neutralize a number of Overwatch agents. Later, he and Widowmaker would try to steal the Doomfist Gauntlet from the Overwatch Museum, but was ultimately stopped by Winston and Tracer, and a nasty punch from this guy. Further down the line, he would find Jack Morrison and Anna in Egypt, and attempt to finish what he had started, but ultimately was bested by the pair. He would remain in Egypt for a little and lead a Talon assault at the Temple of Anubis. They would be fought back by Helix forces as well as Anna and Morrison. He would head for Europe after this. Next, he and Widowmaker would join with Sombra to assassinate Katya Volskaya, but due to Sombra sabotaging the mission, she would get away. Reaper was building suspicion on Sombra due to this, and perhaps knew of the truth of what had happened. Later, he would gain access to a Helix maximum security prison and break Doomfist out. Now, he still works with Talon to help Doomfist bring about his new world order. Now, on the outside, Reaper might just seem like your typically edgy, scary guy. But what I love about him is he's more than just that. He's a man who's been put down time and time again, and everything he's ever worked for to try and fix has been neglected by the ones who were meant to be helping. He was neglected by the ones who were meant to be helping. The police force failed to bring down any of the crime rate, and Overwatch was too restricted, had to follow rules, maintain public relations to do any real good. He was a man who wanted to see the world change for the better. But no matter what he did, no matter how hard he tried, it would always fight against him. A man who had been broken mentally since the death of his parents due to military operations that he was part of. Something he didn't agree with but was forced to partake in. He was forced to watch the evil of the world rise and profit while he was restrained to the laws and rules by the organizations he worked for. And rising tensions between someone who he called his friend due to their differences in leadership and methodology would only lead to disaster. But when Doomfist came along and spoke those words to him, it opened his eyes to the reality that the world only cares for the strong. Him agreeing with Doomfist's ideas and vision of a new world brought him down a path to taking matters into his own hands. It opened his mind to the realization that his code of honor and justice meant nothing, and the only thing the world respected was violence. And that was the code he was going to live by now. Thank you so much for watching this video. I know a lot of people have been asking for Reaper for quite a bit now, and I hope you really did enjoy this video. It would mean the world for me if you could go check out the other videos in the playlist. Genji, Reinhardt, Ramattra, Sigma, with plenty more to come. I try to upload these videos every week on Friday, so hit the subscribe button to be notified when they go up. And I will have a smaller video releasing during the week about Hazard, Overwatch 2's latest hero. If you want to support the channel further, do consider becoming a member. Get yourself a nice little badge next to your name with more perks to come, such as special access to a Discord server. Keep an eye on the community tab to be notified when that Discord server is made. But yeah, the support for these videos has been incredible. and I can't thank you guys enough. Let me know who you want to see next. I love you. And this was the rise and fall of Gabriel Reyes, Reaper. Two dragons. Brothers. Set to inherit a family business and an empire of power and riches. Both extremely skilled in combat from a young age and set on a journey destined for greatness. Until one fateful day, where both of their lives would change. Forever. But before we get to that, let's go back to where it all began. Genji and Hanzo, both brothers of the Shimada clan, which was a clan of ninja based out of Shimada Castle in Hanamura. The clan was formed centuries ago, during the end of the Sengoku period, with Shimada Castle being their base of operation. It worked on a system in which the eldest son of the family's head would become its eventual leader. The Shimada were criminals, but understood the values of honour and loyalty. They would share this with the people of Kanezaka, in which they asked a lot from, which they inspired them to give, and in return would treat the people of Kanezaka with respect. They built an empire on a foundation of lucrative arms trade, illegal substances, and assassinations. Naturally, Hanzo and Genji, being born into the clan, would be expected to run it one day, with Hanzo being at the head of it all. The two were trained in combat and martial arts from a young age by Asa Yamagami, who also taught the two boys how to wall climb. The two learned all this alongside Asa's daughter, Kiriko. Genji was closer with Kiriko than Hanzo. This was mainly due to them both being troublemakers. Genji, as he grew older, took no interest in the family business, opting for more of an easygoing lifestyle, and leading him to spending a lot of time in the arcade with Kiriko in Hanamura. His father would go on to call him Sparrow, as an insult, but Genji would come to adopt it as a nickname. Hanzo, on the other hand, his fate was seemingly sealed the day he was born, being his father Sojiro's firstborn. He was a lot more in line with what the clan expected of him. He was trained from a young age for the responsibility of inheriting his father's empire. He had a natural sense of leadership and possessed an understanding of strategy and tactics. He was also trained by Asa Yamagami and was exceptionally talented in martial arts, sword wielding, and archery. She was a great mentor to both of the young boys. She taught Hanzo many valuable lessons, one such being that it is important to know how to disarm an opponent without lifting a weapon. That more often than not, you can succeed by saying the right words or smiling at the right time. Hanzo never really got close with Kiriko as Genji did, knowing the duty he would one day need to uphold. He considered her a bit of a brat and a nuisance. But after Hanzo and Genji's mother left, Asa became the closest thing the two had to a mother. But an arrogant young Hanzo would look down on her, as he did all the Yamagamis, as he seen them as just mere servants. This would continue until Sojiro, the boys' father, was assassinated by the Hashimoto clan, rivals of the Shimada. Hanzo and Genji were allowed a small time to mourn this, and after his death, Kiriko would bring the brothers a plate piled with mochi as a sign that she was feeling for them, that she cared. But now, Hanzo was thrown into a rough position. He had to now lead his father's empire that was now open to attacks on all sides. From rival clans, to law enforcement, to ultimately the organization Overwatch. This had put the people of Kanezaka at risk. The clan's elders had planned to use Hanzo as their puppet. They instructed Hanzo to straighten out his younger brother, Genji, so that he could assist Hanzo and ultimately the clan, and help keep it protected from within. But this would lead to the biggest decision of his life, the one he would go on to regret forever. Genji refused to help out, still showing no interest in his father's empire. The clan's elders would then instruct Hanzo to do something he truly didn't want. The elder's breathing down his neck, his brother refusing to help the Empire, and threats on all sides to his father's legacy. Wanting to prove himself, Hanzo would strike down his brother, killing him. Hanzo would leave the clan, would be denied access to its finances, and would be declared as an enemy. He would go on to roam the world alone, to try restore his honor, put his past and the grief of killing his brother at rest. All the while, the clan would be sending assassins after him to have him killed for abandoning his clan and his duties. After killing his brother, Hanzo swore to never wield a sword again, relying only on his skill with a bow. Now, he was alone, no family to be with. His father was gone, his clan declared him an enemy, and his brother was dead. His blood was on his hands, or so he thought. Moving back to Genji. After Genji refused to help the clan and ultimately his brother, he had a battle with Hanzo, who for all his life outshone him in combat. Genji would lose this battle, and presumably his life, but he would be rescued on the brink of death by an unlikely ally, Overwatch. While laying in a hospital bed in Kanezaka, he would be approached by Gabriel Reyes, who would ask the young ninja to confirm who he was and offer him a deal. If Genji was to join Blackwatch and help bring down the remnants of the clan, Overwatch could rebuild Genji as something better than he was. Angela Ziegler had objected to this, but Genji agreed, feeling like he had no other option. Ziegler would be in charge of replacing his failing organs and enhancing his body with cybernetics that would improve his natural agility and speed and his already possessed ninja skills. This process would take months, including the physical therapy needed for his cybernetics, which led to Ziegler and Genji forming a close bond with each other, where they would spend a lot of time together and have many late night conversations. In fact, Genji was the only one who could stand the taste of Angela's coffee. While Genji was using his time to recover and getting to know Angela, Reyes would be gathering information on the Shimada clan. Although Reyes was jumping at the chance to get Genji into the mission, he had to wait until he got the all clear from Dr. Ziegler before he could put his plan into motion. Once Genji was given the good to go, he was given the task of taking down the criminal empire alongside the aid of Reyes, Gerard Lacroix, and Cassidy. Blackwatch would go on to perform strategized strikes to arrest major members of the clan and disrupt protection rackets. Eventually, the Shimada clan would implode on itself, but in reality, the clan was already going down in flames, since by this point, Hanzo had abandoned it, and it was a ship without a captain. Genji would go on to hunt down other gangs in the area, while Blackwatch returned to HQ. After this, Genji continued to work with Blackwatch and went on various missions with them, but the one that stands out the most was the Rialto mission. Blackwatch was sent to Rialto to investigate and retrieve Talon member Antonio Bartolotti. They got there early in the day to scope out the area and found Talon members patrolling the grounds. Upon nightfall, they infiltrated the compound to find and retrieve their target, dispatching any Talon personnel they encountered along the way. They found their way to Antonio's office, where he was not impressed nor intimidated to see them there. He knew his abduction would be a bad PR move for Overwatch due to him being a respected businessman. And even if they did put him away, his friends would have him out in a week. Reyes gave it a thought and made a quick and rash decision. He would kill Antonio right there and then. With plan B now in place to fight their way out, Genji did not react and was fully prepared for it, even agreeing with Reyes to kill Antonio. He had an interaction with Cassidy about the ordeal, with Cass not agreeing with what they've done, that this was not the plan. Genji brings up that they've killed before, but Cass responds with a statement that this wasn't just that. This was an execution. Genji replies with, "Dead is dead," and he also shows no sympathy for the Talon soldiers they face. The team managed to fight their way out of Rialto and extract successfully, but now Blackwatch was in the eyes of the world. Everyone knew of their existence now, which resulted in a massive fallout both publicly and politically for Overwatch. The Blackwatch members were put on suspension, but Genji was allowed to train for the larger Overwatch strike team with help from Dr. Ziegler. After a period of time, Genji was reassigned to the main Overwatch strike team along with Tracer and Winston. They would then go on to conduct a mission in Havana, along with Mercy. They were being sent in to retrieve the Omnic casino owner, Maximilian, who has been reported to be funding Talon. He's also one of the members that rose to power within the organization after the death of Antonio. He was traveling in an armored convoy in which the four quickly dispatch of, but Max gets further away into the city. Fighting their way through a horde of Talon soldiers, they quickly catch up with Max, with Genji threatening him with his sword. This encounter would lead to Max telling the team that Doomfist would be in Singapore in 3 weeks, where the strike team would be sent next. Genji has a battle with Doomfist that ends with him being sent into a car and his cybernetic body giving out on him, with Winston stepping in before Doomfist could do any more damage. Later on, the Overwatch headquarters would be destroyed, and with it, Genji would go missing. Overwatch had shut down not long after, and Genji's battle with himself was getting increasingly difficult. It was for the second time in his life he was forced to change his path. He went wandering the world in search of enlightenment and himself, for he was the straw, starting with his brother trying to kill him, the Blackwatch missions, the downfall of Overwatch, and throughout all this, his cybernetic enhancements made him question if he was even still human. Along his travels, he would encounter an Omnic monk in Suravasa, India. His name was Zenyatta. Zenyatta would try to enlighten the cyborg, in which at first he denied, but eventually Genji would come around to the Omnic's words and his lessons, and eventually learn under the Omnic as his student. This helped Genji be at peace with his cyborg body, and made him realize that while part of his flesh was cybernetic, his human soul still remained. While he was with Zenyatta, he learned about an Omnic that once was a friend of his master that left the monastery, his mind clouded in anger and pain. Shortly after, Winston would initiate Overwatch's recall, and Genji would inform Dr. Ziegler of his intention to rejoin, but there was something he must see to first. It was the 10-year anniversary since Hanzo had slain his brother. And as he did every year on the same day, he would break into Shimada Castle, now in the hands of the Hashimoto, dispatch of the guards, and light incense offerings under the sword and banner display to honor his fallen brother, in which he was the killer. Up to this point, Hanzo had been travelling around trying to come to terms with the grief he felt for killing his own flesh and blood. For all he knew now was pain and sorrow. He deeply regretted this action. Hanzo knew he was being followed, and calls out to an assassin that he senses is near. The two would then go on to verbally and physically battle each other, with the assassin questioning Hanzo on his love and honour for his brother, stating that Hanzo tells himself that his brother, Genji, disobeyed the clan, that it was his duty to kill him. Hanzo responds that it was his duty and his burden, that just because he had to does not mean he does not honour him. With the skirmish now continuing, the assassin lectures Hanzo that honour comes with action, not through incense offerings. Hanzo would temporarily get the upper hand on the assassin and attempt to use his dragon strike, but to his surprise, the assassin was able to deflect it, using a dragon of his own. Something only a Shimada could do. Now Hanzo was beaten, and with the assassin's blade at his neck, he requests that he finish it and kill him. But his request for death is denied, and the assassin would reveal himself as his fallen brother.
Brother. No. No. My brother is dead. Genji.
The two would exchange words, and Genji would inform Hanzo that the world was changing, and that it's time to pick a side. Hanzo would reply with,
Real life is not like the stories our father told us. You are a fool for believing it so.
Perhaps I am a fool to think there is still hope for you. But I do. Think on that, brother.
before vanishing using some ninja magic, leaving Hanzo to his thoughts and the knowledge that his brother he thought he killed out of pressure from his clan elders, the death that brought him such grief and anguish, the moment that broke his heart and that he regretted till this day, was still alive. Now, there is more to the two brothers after this short reunion, and if you want to hear more about it, let me know down below. But since they continue on their own paths afterwards, I want to focus on just them. Genji and Hanzo are such amazing characters, much like everyone in Overwatch, and their story is so sad, but touching at the same time. I love the two of them, and I'm really upset not to see their story progress. A theme you'll come to notice with these videos: rewatching the Dragon cinematic and diving deeper into the two brothers has really made me like them more. This story is so good and it deserves to be told. I want to learn more about Hanzo. I feel the emotion he feels, his path to redemption, his path to enlightenment, his path to peace is really interesting, and I want to know how he gets there, how it ends. I also want to see their relationship fixed. I want to see them one day reminisce with each other and spend time as brothers, not as foes, not as adversaries, not as rivals, as brothers. I want to see them embark on a journey together to build a relationship they were denied due to their family's business being thrust upon them. But for now, they face their own paths and choose their own fate. But one day, I hope, once all the fighting is done, once peace is established again, the two can reconnect and bond with each other the way they were meant to, as brothers.
When I was a girl, I had a fear of spiders.
Perhaps the most dangerous woman in the world, Widowmaker is a ruthless assassin, lacking any ounce of emotion or remorse for those unfortunate enough to find themselves within her sniper scope. Despite being a cold-hearted killer, her story is one of tragedy, sadness, and malice. This is Overwatch 2's deadliest assassin, Widowmaker. Amélie Guillard grew up in France within her ancestral home of Chateau Guillard. The manor had fallen into disrepair over the years due to the family's power waning after the French Revolution. Amélie found escape in dance, as she didn't care for her family's traditions and aristocratic tendencies. She was known as a well-accomplished ballet dancer in Paris. Later on, she would meet and marry Gerard Lacroix, an agent of Overwatch who was spearheading operations against the terrorist organization Talon. She didn't think of her husband's career or how it would potentially affect her much, other than it making a good conversation at dinner parties. Unbeknownst to her, it actually placed a target on her head. After multiple failed attempts on Gerard's life, Talon would turn their attention to Amelie. She would be kidnapped in the dead of night. They would put her under immense neural reconditioning and mental strain as Talon had a purpose for her. They needed to get at Gerard, so they decided to go through his wife. Gerard went through every possible resource Overwatch had at its disposal to try and retrieve his wife, and before long, they succeeded. She was physically and psychologically cleared and all seemed to be well. She would kill Gerard in his sleep 2 weeks later. They had turned Amelie into a sleeper agent and succeeded in their mission to kill Gerard. She would be hunted by police and Overwatch agents relentlessly. She was haunted by what she had done. But alongside that grief, that pain, came something that scared her even more. She felt alive after killing her husband. It had given her such a high that she returned to Talon seeking to relive that feeling that excited but terrified her. Her training was complete once she returned, and she was trained in covert tactics as well as being trained by the best in wielding a sniper rifle. With the assistance of Moira, her aim would drastically be improved due to Moira slowing her heart rate down tremendously, causing her skin to turn blue and cold, numbing her human emotion. It helped her deal with the pain of killing her husband, and only heightened the rush of securing a kill. Eventually, Amelie was dead. All that was left was Widowmaker. She would become Talon's most deadly assassin and one of the most dangerous women to walk on the earth. During a mission led by Jack Morrison, in which a number of scientists were rescued from the grasp of Talon, Widowmaker was present and able to take out a number of Overwatch agents. This led to an ensuing sniper battle between herself and Anna Amari. While Anna was able to temporarily incapacitate Widowmaker, hitting her helmet exposing her face, Anna would hesitate to land the killing blow due to the shock of finding out Amelie Lacroix was alive. Up to this point, she was assumed to either be dead or still in the grasp of Talon. Little did they ever consider that Talon was using her as a weapon. This small moment of hesitation was all Widowmaker needed to compose herself and take a shot back, taking out Anna's eye. Moving on further down the line, Overwatch has fallen, and Talon is only gaining more power. She would take part in a mission to secure Dr. Sebring the Kuiper from a black site in New Mexico. Doomfist promised her a clear path to Sebring, but unfortunately Sombra and Reaper triggered the alarm, and she would go on to call them amateurs. The mission, however, was a success, with Widowmaker and her team slaughtering any resistance that came their way. Later on, Widowmaker would be dispatched on a mission to King's Row with one sole objective: to assassinate Tukata Mondata, the leader of the Shambali monks, as he was set to make a speech in the area. She would take some time to reflect upon herself and how as a young girl she had a fear of spiders. Now she became exactly like them. She positioned herself upside down on the side of a building, but unbeknownst to her, someone was onto her. Tracer was present at the speech and had listened into radio chatter of some Secret Service guards and found out where she was. Interrupting her just before she could get the shot off, the two would engage in a battle amongst the rooftops. Tracer warned Mondata's guard to get him out of the area as she pursued Widow. She would try her best to land a cheeky pulse bomb on the Talon assassin, but ultimately it backfired and blew the two off the roof of a nearby building. As the two were airborne, Widowmaker positioned herself perfectly to take out either of her now two targets. She aimed directly at Tracer's chronal accelerator and fired. This caused Tracer to recoil, but little did she know, directly behind her would be the head of Mondata.
Looks like the party is over.
As Tracer would chase her down and yell at her,
Why? Why would you do this?
she would only respond with a laugh and the phrase,
chérie.
As a Talon aircraft arrived to pick her up, she'd flip over Tracer, knocking her into the side of a building, and leave. Mandata was dead, and Widowmaker had gotten away. She would reflect on this, stating that Mandata was one of her finest kills. Another mission she would take part in would be one to secure the Doomfist Gauntlet, in which her and Reaper would break into an Overwatch museum to retrieve it, but would ultimately be stopped by Tracer and Winston. Another would be to assassinate Katya Volskaya, but this mission would also fail due to Sombra acting of her own free will and sparing the life of Katya. Later on, she would attend a casino with Doomfist, but was interrupted by Talon agents loyal to Viali, a member of Talon's inner circle. Her, Sombra, and Reaper would dispatch the Talon agents loyal to Viali, while Doomfist would deal with Viali himself by throwing him off a bridge. Widowmaker would also visit her husband's grave over Christmas, leaving a rose atop it. She would also return to her ancestral home at some point. And that's all we got. Other than her pulling up on Zenyatta in Suravasa with Sombra, kinda not much there. Very similar to Sigma in that regard. An extremely interesting and potentially deep character that just has not been explored to their full potential. But without talking about how PvE failed and the story we were meant to get that never got finished, let's talk about the potential we could still get. With the Overwatch 2 spotlight, we got vast amounts of information and answers straight from the Overwatch 2 dev team themselves. One of the things mentioned was that Aaron Keller himself would love to see an Overwatch TV show, and I've been saying this for months at this stage, that this would be the best thing Overwatch could do. Now, is it likely to happen just because Aaron said he wants one? No. But hey, a man can dream. An Arcane style show for Overwatch would be fire, even if it was just to focus down to a small number of them, similar to the way Arcane did. Maybe focus on the current Overwatch team, maybe focus on members of Talon, or the old soldiers like Ana and Soldier. Something, anything would be great, as long as they remain true to themselves and got the actual cast to voice their characters. You wouldn't want to see something with Reinhardt if it wasn't voiced by Darren DePaul. I really don't feel like anyone could bring as much energy to the character like he does. Another thing they said was that they want to expand their ways of storytelling due to them realizing that they have been slacking on that lately. More short cinematics, more in-game events, more engaging comics. These are all great ways of exploring these characters and making people like Widowmaker more fleshed out and in-depth. There's a lot to play around when it comes to Widowmaker. Like, what about an internal struggle for power between the weapon that was created by Talon and the woman who she used to be? That sense of emotion slowly crawling its way back in. Amelie begging herself to stop the killing and not to be this tool Talon created for their own needs. That is why I personally like Widowmaker. She's this incredibly dangerous, cold-hearted killer who at one stage used to just be a famous ballet dancer in Paris. Her story is incredibly sad. A woman who just married the man she loved, not knowing how much danger it would put her in, taken from her home and broken mentally, turned into a living weapon to be used on her husband. I'd love to see more about what she was like before she became Widowmaker. All we get to see is this cold-hearted, emotionless assassin. I want to see how she'd act, how she'd feel on a daily basis. Doesn't even have to be anything big. A little snippet. Maybe her and Gerard at a dinner party. Maybe how she felt about dancing. Anything. I'd like to just see the potential depth of this character explored more. So I am holding out for a big expansion of the lore in the coming months. Not just for Widowmaker, but for the incredibly unique universe of Overwatch as a whole. But that's all we got for now. If you did enjoy this video, hit that subscribe button. It does mean a lot. And if you made it to this stage in the video, thank you so much. My passion and love for Overwatch has been revitalized ever since the spotlight, and it made me realize that I will always truly love this game and this universe. Let me know who you want to see next down below, whose story you want to hear next. If you want to support the channel, you can consider becoming a member, but also hitting the like button and the subscribe button is the best way to support us. Check out all my social media linked below, and all the other Overwatch and Elden Ring videos we have down there too. But yeah, this was Widowmaker.